Hey everybody, we've recently been in this message series, Neighboring, and we've been learning to love our neighbor and understanding who is our neighbor. And basically, Jesus taught us that our neighbor is everybody. In week 1, our subject was, My Neighbor is a Different Color. And we talked about the very important and the often divisive subject of racism. And at Chapelhill, we're committed that we're going to be part of the solution and never part of the problem. See, we want to be like that Samaritan, the man who took time to walk across the street and invest in his neighbor, even though there was huge racial tension between the Jews and Samaritans. See, Jesus died that we might be reconciled not only to God, but also to one another. In week 2 of our series, it was My Neighbor Lives in a Different Part of Town. In other words, the poor are all around us, and Jesus called us to serve the poor, even if it means going to a different part of town or even to a different part of the world to serve somebody. Someone may not look like you, they may not dress like you, drive like you, or live near you, but Jesus says they are your neighbor. And then it was Paul and Onesimus from Paul's letter to Philemon. My neighbor needs good news. And we learned that Paul invested in his neighbor Onesimus. And even though Onesimus was a thief, he was a runaway slave, it didn't matter to Paul. See, lost people matter to God and should matter to us as well. Formerly, Onesimus was a thief. He was a runaway. But now, Paul said, he's a brother in Christ. Formerly, but now. I love that. Formerly, but now. We're investing in our neighbors so that they can hear the good news, the gospel of Jesus, and be able to say, formerly, but now, the gospel changes people. And then in week 4, my neighbor is lonely. Loneliness exists when there's a disconnection from others in relationship. And you know what? These may now be the top 4 causes of loneliness. Number 1, the breakdown of the family. Also, increased mobility. See, people don't stay in one place very long, and they lose critical relationships. Number 3, heavy workloads. People are busy, which can equal lonely. Also, the rise of social media. A click does not result in true connectivity, intimacy, or relationship. We also learn that we live fully human lives only when we live in communion with God and with others. People are lonely and they need a neighbor. So, who do we need to be neighboring? Finally, our series reminded us the importance of miracles. We believe God does miracles. People were often bringing their neighbors to Jesus in the New Testament. In Mark chapter 2, 4 men carried their paralytic neighbor to Jesus. These 4 men even tore away the roof to lower the man so he could get to Jesus. I told you, we need to tear away the excuses. For instance, the excuse of, I'm too busy to serve my neighbor, or I'm afraid what people might think, or I've tried this before, or it's not my personality, or it's not my job. Listen, if it's not my job as a follower of Jesus, whose job is it? And then in Mark chapter 2, verse 5, it says, when Jesus saw their faith, when he saw the faith of this man's neighbors, everything changed for the paralyzed man. Listen, this series is chock full of faith and practical teaching of how you can love your neighbor, how you can serve your neighbor. And if you have a story about how God has used you to love your neighbor, I want you to go to our app and click on My Story and let us know, or just go to our Chapelhill app and click on the messages and then click on the Neighboring series. And I want you to start listening to it today.